Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 162 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is David Howe.
My name is Matthew Stoner.
My name is Patrick Nisley.
Oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest returning to today's episode. Mr. Frank Netscher has joined the podcast. How's it going, Frank?
It's good. Good. Or bad, depending, but it's good.
Yeah. We all live in the liminal space between good and bad, don't we? Frank is coming back on the podcast for tonight's episode because we were doing an episode all about unionizing and labor relations in the video game industry. I feel like the American workforce right now is going through a bit of a labor rights resurgence. I feel like organization is on the rise, and in a lot of ways, we think that it might be high time for the video game industry to do the same. We're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of that, where we fall on that, and how it might be good for the entire industry at large. We also have a lot of news and rumors to go over this week. We have some potential Switch Sports data mining going on. We've talked a little bit about, we've got some Ubisoft acquisition news. Jeff Keighley keeps on pimping that Summer Game Fest, and lots more. Before we get into all that stuff, how are we doing? How was this past week for everybody? We having a pretty good week?
I had a great fucking week. I was in New York City, baby.
That's right. Very good. How was the Big Apple?
And the Big Apple was good. Had a great time. Ate many sandwiches from bodegas, which is the best thing to do in New York City. Fuck Broadway, just give me bodega sandwiches. It was a great trip, man. I love New York. I love visiting New York.
Was it centered around something? Is there an event or thing you went to go do specifically, or just kind of?
We saw some shows. We saw POTUS featuring Rachel Dratch. Some other shows. We did Sleep No More. We went to MoMA. Ate a lot of sandwiches.
That's great. I miss New York so much. I used to go like twice a year, and I haven't been since the pandemic. And it's killing me. It's eating me up inside. Got to make that pilgrimage to the Rockefeller Center Nintendo store.
Yeah, I went there too. If you saw a video on our Instagram of me taking a sweep of all the amiibo at the Nintendo store in New York City, that was me.
That's right. We're good little consumers. What about you, Patrick? How was your past week?
It's been pretty good. I finished up another game jam and was got to share that with some folks on a stream this morning. That was a lot of fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
That took up a lot of my time. But other than that, yeah, things are pretty good, I guess.
We went to Games Y'all. That was
that's
a
right.
blast.
That was a big thing.
Oh yeah. Where was that at in Austin?
That's at the Museum of Human Achievement here in Austin.
Fucking love MOHA.
Yeah, it's great. It's a really cool get together for kind of like indie game devs to come and just kind of mingle. But then also there are these like rapid fire, like 5-minute PowerPoint presentations that they kind of each do on all different kinds of topics. Like one of them was about like modifying Mr. Driller for the Game Boy Advance. One was about like how to best present yourself at PAX. One was about, what was it? How to find trans erotica on itch.io. So there was lots of different kinds of topics.
Yeah.
And it's MOHA, so everybody's just kind of drinking and hanging and kind of socializing. It was a very fun time. Even if you're not a developer, I think it's worth going there, even if you're just like a games fan and want to kind of get plugged into the indie scene here in Austin. It's a great meetup. I recommend it.
And that's in Austin at the Museum of Human Achievement.
Yeah,
they do it once a month now. They've recently restarted since COVID, and I think it's the first Friday.
Yeah,
of every month is at least the goal. So, and you have to like RSVP, but you can find it out. Just Google Games Y'all.
Games Y'all,
come up.
Formerly known as Juegos Rancheros, which I've been going to for years. And yeah, and so it's kind of the spiritual successor to Juegos Rancheros. It's a lot of fun. What about you, Frank? How was your past week?
I am getting married, so not a lot is going on.
Very good.
Thank you. I only say that to get congratulations.
Congratulations. Love is real.
Hey, love is real. I've decided, at least in the eyes of my tax forms, and
Oh, God. Don't let her listen to this episode.
Yeah, jeez. I'm only doing it for the money.
Yes. This is the only way. I need that $200. Whatever.
Yeah, They say you can't buy me love, but you can for $200.
But because I've been inside a lot, I've been trying to play games online with friends, and so that we don't bring COVID to the wedding. And I got shamed for having almost 300 hours in Stardew Valley on my Switch this week.
Shame.
No shame.
Yeah. Hey, listen, that game is my safe place. Yeah.
I think they just announced that they've sold 20 million units of that game.
Wow.
Pretty wild.
Good God.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah. One guy. Yeah.
In
crazy stuff.
I forget what the name of it is. What is it called? Like, the Jason Schreier book where he kind of follows a bunch of different not indie developers, just different developments of different games. And that guy lived like in some like rented house that he shared with his wife, and like they had roommates, and then he just made millions of dollars kind of like overnight when that game released, because there was such a huge following of it.
Yeah.
And it's basically like we put that money in a bank account because we were just terrified of having that much money and like didn't look at it for a while.
You got to put it in the S&P and in crypto. We're having fun.
Be like Notch and get that weird house and hang out with Jason.
Yeah. Start to have weird opinions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And very quickly shift.
Yeah. Very good.
Well, before we get into the news, real briefly, some shout outs. Our last episode was on Switch Sports, and none of the comments are related to that, but now that I look at them, but on our Discord, Swampy Southpaw wanted to mention the shout out to Vampire Survivor, which our last guest Lynn Creates mentioned. And also Steve Irwin mentioned that Reggie has been doing podcasts, as David said, and asked if Reggie's the guest, but unfortunately not.
Frank, take your mask off. The Reginator's here.
And then lastly, over on our Instagram, Voxelhead Studio responded to our last episode with raised hands. So we appreciate hearing from anybody who has anything to share with us, any comments on this episode. We also appreciate it if you go and mention the podcast somewhere online, and also like and subscribe on YouTube. And we've got some Nintendo and gaming news and rumors to discuss. First up is that only in Japan, so far as I know, this was a few days ago, so maybe the English one will come out by the time the podcast comes out. But there is a rather lengthy Mario Strikers Battle League trailer that released in Japan, and they also put out the Japanese website for the game. So you can go and watch that or check out the website. And there's quite a bit of footage and Japanese characters in the menus that they show off that I don't know what's going on. But I think what we can surmise is some of the game mechanics, and some of that includes that what armor you choose for your character has effects, because there's different outfits, and they are armor. They look like armor for the different characters. It looks like there are what is it? I think it's 10 characters, or is it 8? They show the menu for selecting them, and also like there's some mechanics where you can like push your teammates to kind of give them a boost. And I don't know, they just kind of show off some of the super moves and items and stuff. It looks interesting and crazy. And it's also weird to see these characters in this like battle armor.
Yeah, I agree. I agree because the models all look really, really good. Because this is next level, right? And like they do amazing animations and amazing character models, and they're like very animation centric, right? And so it's like, you see this, it's like the best looking DK I've ever seen in a video game.
Laser.
Yeah, but he's got like laser eyes, and he's all like covered in strange football gear. So looks super fun, man.
Yeah. And they show off kind of the multiplayer and the online multiplayer, but I couldn't tell what was happening.
Yeah.
Because it just wasn't clear. But I imagine this, again, this is games coming out honestly not that long from now, like a month and a week, something like that, right? So this English trailer, or is a similar English trailer is likely to drop soon. It does. I mean, one thing that I don't want to say I was disappointed, but it does, and maybe this is just like going to be a, update situation, but there's only like, it's 8 characters, right? Maybe 10. It seems a little light, maybe.
I don't know
What do
about
you
that.
think?
I
You don't
feel
think
like
so?
we got. I think we got unlockable characters.
You think so? Because it's
Probably already built in. Yeah.
It's a 4-on-4. It looks like Boom Boom is always the goalie, and that is not something you can play or control. I'm just guessing based on this trailer, because the character select screen shows 10 characters, and then Boom Boom is always in goal. And so I'm guessing that's the case. And so it always looks like the same characters, in every one. And I'm guessing when you play online, you can play as the same character. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm not asking for like 80 characters. Maybe 10 is enough. I don't know. What do you?
Let's see all the characters like Smash. Let's see Sonic. Fuck it. Let's see Mythra and Pyra
in their armor.
Let's see Idris Elba's Knuckles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bring the carts. Make it Rocket League. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, look, we already have Nintendo Rocket League, and that's Switch Sports Soccer.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, it's
Excited.
really fun. We'll talk about it
boy.
later in the show. Yeah.
I don't know. How do we feel about this? It does look fun to me. I'm cautiously optimistic about this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks good. I've never really played a Strikers game before, not gonna lie. So I don't really know exactly what to expect. I'm excited to play it because I think a lot of people in our community are gonna get it, and I think having a football club would be really fun within Switch Headz, right? Like something that we can play online. Because I think I'm personally like having so much fun playing Nintendo Switch Sports Soccer. Like I cannot stop playing that game. I'm like totally addicted to it. But this looks like a completely different game. You know what I mean? Yeah. And the ability to actually play with your friends online, you know what I mean? And actually like progress together seems like a ton of fun. Frank, have you played a Strikers game before? Is this interesting to you?
Yeah. I played the game on GameCube. I forget which one it was called, First Strike or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was just Mario Strikers.
Mario Strikers.
No, is that what this one is? Yeah,
but this one's Battle League.
It used to make me so angry that I would have to like tell my little brother, like, because he would be destroying me. I'd be like, I gotta run, and I'm not a guy that gets mad at video games. So it was.
You don't get mad at 300 hours into Stardew Valley.
Yeah, like,
fucking.
Who cares
farm.
how you spend your time? How dare you read books?
I think it could be a fun trash talking time.
Yeah, agreed.
I played all of the Strikers. One for the Wii, GameCube. Charged is for the Wii. Am I remembering that right?
That's what it is.
Okay.
Super Mario Strikers is the GameCube one. I just looked it up.
I think it's interesting. Like the gameplay looks similar, if not the same, as all the other previous Strikers, and it's a very simple arcade soccer game. It maybe has 3 or 4 buttons besides like movement, passing and shooting and lobbing, and then different button combinations. So it's simplicity in gameplay. It's showing complexity in some of the team management, as Patrick was saying about like the armor and like choosing different makeups of the team members. I think that's where it differentiates from the other Strikers.
Gotcha.
I'm excited. Let's do a club.
Let's do it.
That'll be fun. Well, we'll give our thoughts on that in a month or so, or a month and a half, whatever it is.
Time will tell.
Time will tell.
When does it come out?
It comes out like around the 13th or something. What's that Friday? The 10th?
June 10th. June 10th. Yeah. Okay.
Quite literally a month. Anyway, we should move on.
Please.
Also in Nintendo Sports news, Switch Sports. Apparently there's been some surveys or like feedback forms going out to people who bought the game and are playing the game, asking about it. And so people are using that to assume that maybe there will be some, right? Doesn't that sort of lead people to assume that there'll be some DLC based on the questions? I haven't actually seen these forms.
Generally, I mean, I didn't get one myself, which is kind of a shame because there's a lot I want to say, you know.
What do you all want to, we'll do it now and
Well, no, I mean, it's just like, you know, this is kind of more of like a PSA than anything of like, check your email and see if you get it. Because I think that like, especially if you've played the older Wii Sports games in the series, and, you know, we talked a lot about this last week, there's a lot missing, you know, and a lot of the survey was actually asking like, did you play Wii Sports Resort? How do you think that this compares in value to Wii Sports Resort and all this different kind of stuff, right? And so it's like, they're very much like aware of complaints that have been coming out in the review period. And I think they probably had their own kind of ideas on how they were going to expand the game. But even now they're asking for a lot of feedback in regards to that. And I feel like a lot of games where they've done this before, it's actually been, you know, really beneficial to them. Like I know it's not exactly Nintendo, but, you know, Square did this with Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy and got lots of feedback for stuff like that. So I think that it's worth checking out. And if anything, it kind of proves to me that this is like not just a one and done release. I think that they're really planning on expanding this as a platform down the road quite a bit, which is exciting for me because I really enjoy the game, but I do think it's light on content.
I know that some of the data mining that's been happening, and I know we talked about some of it last week, but I don't know that we talked about all of it, including sort of the costumes and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there's been people that have seen how many packs of, you know, because they kind of come out, and I don't know what the word they use is, but like, what do they call it? It's
collections, I think.
Collection, yeah.
Yeah. There's like one a week, I believe, is kind of how they're doing it.
Yeah, it's tough to keep up with. You got to play a lot of sports.
Yeah, I'm on the basketball pack right now. I got a lot of, or not basketball, soccer, the soccer pack right now. I just finished watching Winning Time, so I have basketball on the brain. But yeah, that, and then also I was reading something as well that have you guys done the credits in this game?
I haven't, but I've looked at the images because of what you're about to say.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say this is something we didn't talk about last week, but when you go to play the credits, it's actually a playable credits, and you bounce a tennis ball against the side of the credits with motion controls, and it's actually really fun. So I enjoy that. But like in the images that they have on there are lots of images of like hang gliding and kayaking and like all these other sports that are not currently included. That kind of also leads people to think that those might be some of the next sports that are coming in. So either way, I'm very much enjoying this game, and I'm looking forward to more content coming out for it.
Nice. Well, next news item is a news item that never really dies, I guess. And this is Duke Nukem Forever, the title of the game. It seems to be forever on the minds of gamer fans. I don't know. But there's been
hell yeah, baby. Let's bring more Duke.
Yeah. Also, way to just riff on the word forever for about 30 seconds. That was really nice.
But apparently there's somebody that claims they have a build of the game that was shown off at E3 2001. And as folks know, this game never really came out, right? Like, so
no, it did.
Or it did, right?
Yeah. So it came out like 15 years after.
Mm-hmm. Came out like 10. Okay,
so maybe 10
help me with
later.
the timeline on this thing.
Yeah, so basically this game had been in development for a while by the time it was shown off in 2001, right? And then it wasn't 15 years later. I think it was like maybe 2010, 2013, something, 2014 maybe. It eventually came out after being reworked. It was like a long time thought to be dead game.
Yeah.
It eventually came out to horrible reviews. It was an awful game, right? Just because it was like one of those classic things of like, it restarts development so many times they lose sight of what it's meant to be. And so it just kind of became this terrible corridor shooter. But
also the character of Duke Nukem is like maybe aged not so great.
Oh yeah. No, it's from a different era, right? Like it's from this era, really, you know, like it would have been great around the time of the release of Charlie's Angels Full Throttle, right? But unfortunately, that's just what I have in my head for that era. I saw that on TV recently, and I was like, "Oh, you can't really do this movie today." But anyway, it's of its time. But Anyway, the whole build has leaked, and there's tons of video of it, of like it in its original state before it was completely reworked.
Gotcha.
It's just a really interesting relic, and the guy who has it basically is planning on dumping the whole thing online next month. So it's kind of exciting, just from a kind of game historian perspective, to kind of like see one of these. You know, this game was kind of legendary for a really long time as being this thing that just never really released, and people were like, what is it? And then because it was so terrible when it eventually did release, it's always been kind of like a point of contention as to like what the game used to be. So we'll all get to play it next month. So I find it just to be a pretty fascinating story.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just looking this up. Apparently, it was a critical failure, but Take-Two said the game made a profit. So
Okay.
when it released-
After 15 years of development, I don't know.
I don't know.
about
That's what they say.
that.
And like Duke as like a intellectual property is in this weird gray area because the franchise, like Gearbox owns some of that, and then id Software owns it. I always get mixed up on who owns what. But last thing I remember is that they're in court battling who actually owns the intellectual property of Duke Nukem.
Right. So, because I mean, Gearbox is owned by Embracer Group, who we talked about last week, buying some of the Square Enix studios. So I guess it's kind of between them and I guess Microsoft, right? Microsoft owns it at this point.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Gotta love it, dude. Fucking, it's Godzilla versus Kong, dude. Fucking,
And they're battling over the most expensive property, the most exciting property.
Man, I love Duke Nukem. Duke Nukem is
I do too.
It's a terrible character. But goddamn, if I
Hail to the king.
Yeah, I spent so many hours in the build engine building levels for Duke Nukem 3D. And so this was the first foray personally into making levels and game design.
And for those interested, Duke Nukem 3D actually has a really good port on the Switch currently, which I think is like $5. It's definitely worth checking out if you like those old school shooter gameplays.
You better.
Yeah, you better. Better like strippers.
Clearly, I missed out on Duke Nukem.
Patrick would be a totally different guy if he played Duke Nukem as a kid.
Yeah. Screw the earth. I don't get rid of solar panels.
Shake it, baby. Just constantly saying that.
Yeah, you'd basically be Frank.
Yeah.
All right. Well, another thing we have to look forward to this summer is Summer Game Fest. I guess. So we've talked about this. E3 is not happening, so Summer Game Fest is, really gonna be putting itself out there. Jeff Keighley, this event, sort of amorphous event, but they've announced some dates and some of the things that are happening under this umbrella of things, and they're sort of happening in early June. The things that we know of, which I don't know how much this stuff is really Summer Game Fest or stuff that would happen even if there was no quote unquote Summer Game Fest, but there's an opening Summer Game Fest thing that is specifically to it on June 9th. And then there's a couple of showcases over the next few days, including the big Xbox and Bethesda one that's happening on June 12th, which probably they're just like, sure, you can say it's part of it. Right. Probably.
I think the question is if Nintendo is going to go along with it or not, or if they'll just do their own thing.
Yeah, I'm sure that like they'll do their own thing, and then Jeff will be like, Nintendo putting out a direct, right? Like I feel like he did that last time, right? Like he's listing all these events.
It was part of E3 last time.
Yeah, but he's always like listing it or whatever is
a
gaming event that's happening in the summer. Anyway, so that will be happening.
It's also playing in IMAX, right? Did I read that right?
I think that's true.
I think like they're renting out IMAX theaters for this fucking thing.
If you can go to an IMAX. I don't know. What does it mean? Yeah. Like you can go to an IMAX theater and watch
compressed 1080p videos of game trailers on a giant screen.
Let's
tiled like YTMND gifs.
Yeah.
Honestly, that might be funny if we did that.
I'd go.
Oh, man.
I would never go by myself. But as a bit,
that's the thing. We have to go.
we all have to go. Yeah.
Yeah. We should go and bring our phones and try to film it and see if we get kicked out.
It's on the internet already.
yeah, it's
Come
streamed
on,
live.
let us film it.
Tickets are $45.
Within the last couple of weeks, we talked about the rumors that Ubisoft might get acquired, that they were kind of like exploring, private equity firms and that kind of thing. And I guess it sounds like some of the news is that how do you say his name? Guillemot?
Yves Guillemot, I believe.
Guillemot? Apparently it's
Guillemot.
it may be that the Guillemot family is trying to work with the private equity team to like take full ownership of the company. So that's a little bit disappointing. Right? Is that, Matthew, you look like you want to say something.
Well, yeah, it depends how you want to look at it.
That's how I want to look at it.
Yeah, they're protecting, if they take full control, then they're protecting Ubisoft from acquisition from someone else. So they have
can
more
stay in the very important leadership hands of each. Right?
Everybody hates that guy. He should not have full control of the company.
That's what it feels like, right?
Yeah. I mean, he already does. I mean, he's the president or CEO or whatever, right? So it's like, you would really hope that if this thing gets sold, he would be ousted. And I think that a lot of the employees of Ubisoft feel the same way because he's been kind of what's been holding them back for a while. I mean, there was a time when he was lauded as like a brilliant games developer and stuff like that. But over the years, a lot of like power and corruption and really bad business practices have been found to be happening at Ubisoft, and it's time for him to go. So I think it would be smart for anybody trying to make an acquisition like this to have that be part of their clause.
But Matthew, finish what you were going to say, because it's
yeah, it depends. Either they're going to get bought, or he takes more power and then keeps Ubisoft as a separate entity, unable to be acquired unless he sells it or his group sells it.
Right. Well, apparently their stocks went up when discussion of this happened. So good for somebody.
It sounds like it's all part of the plan. You stir up rumors to build up the stock price, and then you sell high.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
what a wonderful world we live in?
Yeah. That's what I learned from Reddit. Diamond hands. Buy low, sell high.
Did we learn nothing from GameStop?
No.
While we're talking money and numbers, just want to quickly mention that the Nintendo financial report for whatever quarter or maybe even the year at this point, it's we get the whole fiscal year of 20. I don't know. There's some big Nintendo financials that are coming out very soon, but between when we record and when we release. So we will be talking about those next week.
Just making sure they're not out now. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it. Should be coming out very soon. We'll definitely talk about it next week. Of note we'll finally get revealed numbers on Metroid Dread sales, which has been a big kind of point of contention, whether or not it's going to hit that 3 million mark or around there that Metroid Prime did. That's kind of up in the air, and we won't see sales from Switch Sports on this because that came out this fiscal quarter. But it'll be interesting to see, like how the chip shortage has affected their overall sales, if at all, and stuff like that. So look forward to that next week. And then we've mentioned Reggie Fils-Aimé, the former Nintendo president of America, that is to say. Mm-hmm. He put out a book this past week. That's why he's been on all these podcasts, disrupting the game from the Bronx to the top of Nintendo. So that book is out if you are interested in reading about it. I understand it's kind of like it's got like some sort of like business advice kind of stuff in it, right? That's sort of how it's framed. I haven't read it. I just kind of read a little bit about it. And he's been out doing interviews and that kind of stuff, including a big one with the Washington Post.
which you can go check out and read online if you want. Lots of, information there and quotes from him. If you want to read about that and about his book, obviously, and
specifically about his days at Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the book. Yeah, but it's not. I don't think that's why anybody's picking it up.
Hey, that interests me.
Pizza
Yeah.
Heads.
I'm always
Disrupt
interested in
butt heads.
PepsiCo brands.
So I was going to ask if that's PepsiCo or Darden.
It's PepsiCo. for
Yeah,
sure.
very good.
I got
Yeah.
you. Got you for your corporate structure.
Thank you. Yeah, he's definitely been making the rounds. And not a moment too soon, because it's definitely an interesting time for this book to have come out, right? Which we'll get to in a second. But it's good to kind of hear his perspective on some of this stuff, but it's also like very illuminating because Reggie's been kind of like made up to be this kind of legendary figure at Nintendo, which to some extent he is. I mean, he was around, during the whole boom of the Wii era, and that was like really when the NOA like kind of marketing machine like really took off, and that's kind of what happened here in the US is I think the reason that console was so insanely successful, right? So it's definitely going to be interesting. I haven't read the book yet either, but to like read a lot about that specifically, I'm sure he's not totally happy with all the news reports that have been coming out about Nintendo at this time that he's trying to kind of like sell his book. You know what I mean?
Totally. And to that point, which also feels a little bit like not true. He has a quote in this Washington Post interview where he talks about, hearing about the news. Like they must have asked him about this news surrounding, the criticisms of working conditions at Nintendo and contractors and that sort of thing. And he's like, that's not the Nintendo I left, but that was only a few years ago. And like, it's not like, salaries get shot down in 3 years or whatever, which is some of the criticisms or contract workers are now. I mean, he, maybe some of it's true that he did encourage a healthier, as he says, healthier, relationship with contractors, but it does feel a little, like David said, like him trying to distance himself from the bad news.
Mm-hmm.
Frank, you looked like you wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, I read that quote too, and I was like, the problem here, you were part of it. Like he's been gone for like 3 seconds. There's not.
Yeah, it was 2019 that he left, right? So it was kind of just pre-pandemic, and it's like, a lot of I read the Kat Bailey's article on IGN, which I think we discussed maybe briefly last week, or maybe it came out in between.
I think it came out in between. There was the Kotaku one that came out.
Right. Okay, that's what it was. Yeah, but I read Kat Bailey's article at IGN, and from a lot of what the kind of complaints that have been coming out from within Nintendo from contractors has been starting around like 2015. It's like as like the Wii U was really failing. You know what I mean? That's when like a lot of these issues started happening, which, that's 4 years under the tutelage of Reggie Fils-Aimé, right? And so it's, so he'll definitely do his best to kind of shift all the blame to Doug Bowser, just because it's kind of what I guess you do when you're promoting a book, right? Like, but
it's literally what Howard Schultz is doing with Starbucks right now.
Oh yeah.
Like the same.
So that'll do it. And again, this doesn't mean that like Reggie is necessarily like was a bad leader, right? I mean, if anything, it's more of a systemic problem within Silicon Valley and the tech industry as a whole, right?
Capitalism.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we have this like more for like the main topic here, but it's
we can. I mean, this feels like a good point for us to transition,
kind of loop it in,
But if you want to finish your thought at least, or
well, no, it's just it's there's a lot of like pressure from not only within US based tech sector to do a lot of these kind of like carrot dangling contractor kind of industry I don't know what you would call it ways of managing your company. This terrible sentence, I apologize for that, but it's like also there's also major issues coming from how NOA is kind of like just really a marketing arm for NCL, which is Nintendo of Japan, right? And so it's like, I just feel like this whole thing was like a very big cascade of a lot of different issues, none of which look very good and all of which like hurt employees of the company, right? And so, well, I'm sure we'll get into a lot more of that in our main topic, but at times you like kind of understand where Reggie's coming from, but then also at times you're like, okay, I can't really take everything you're saying at face value because, this all happened under you.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is
Well,
going
I
back
think-
just a little bit back to the Ubisoft conversation. In that interview with Guillemot, at the end of it, he says,
He's Guillemot.
Thank you for thank you for editing that. At the end of the article, he goes on to say Ubisoft could remain independent, but that any offers to buy the company would be reviewed in the interest of its stakeholders. And same thing with Reggie. Like Reggie is both a marketing arm to what you just said, David, but he's also part of the business operating Nintendo of America in the interest of its stakeholders.
Yeah.
And trying to make the most money and make the most profit. And that includes squeezing contract workers.
Yeah. Just outside of the kind of controversy going on in Nintendo right now, I do also want to say, like, there are some like pretty interesting tidbits I've read about from this book. Like, apparently he like hated Donkey Konga and was just like really open about how he was like, I think it's hurting the Donkey Kong brand, and I think the bongos are stupid and I hate them. And so it's like stuff like that is what really makes me want to read the book. You know what I mean? Getting like some spicy Reggie takes.
Yeah, and I think there was one about him, like in Shigeru Miyamoto, really disagreeing about Wii Sports being a pack-in and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think Miyamoto was like really offended by the notion of that, right? Of being like, oh, we don't give Nintendo games away for free, Reggie, But it was clearly the right idea. It's now like still the most highest selling game of all time, even if
And Donkey Konga, one of the lowest.
Donkey Konga was a
I don't know if
success.
that's
It turned a profit for them.
I remember hearing lots of good things about Donkey Konga.
He was wrong on the Konga.
Yeah. He was Donkey Ronga.
All right, let's. I think
Put me to bed. Put me to sleep. Throw me in the river. I'm done.
We're gonna take a break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk a lot more about these recent Nintendo issues and a lot more about unions in the video game industry and sort of these this labor movement that's happening after the break. All right, we are back, and we are going to be talking this week about unionization efforts and sort of labor rights issues that have been happening, in particular related to video games. This, as David said, this is kind of happening in lots of different spheres, but there's been sort of a big movement in video game industry towards this, and there's also been a lot of bad press about some of the big players in the video games, including Nintendo most recently. So we were kind of talking about that at the end of the news section. So maybe we can start with that, especially since we're a Nintendo podcast, kind of talk about what's been happening in Nintendo and sort of, use that as a lead into the industry issues and unionization efforts and that sort of thing. So I think it started, there was like a complaint filed with the, about conditions and about somebody being terminated because they had mentioned unions. And then there's been a lot of contractors who come forward about the way that contracts are dealt with and the way they feel like lesser employees and sort of dangling contracts in front of people, which is unfortunately a common thing with contract workers across industries. But we were kind of just talking about this. Does anybody have anything else they wanted to say about the Nintendo specifically?
Only to be more specific about the allegations. There are four main ones, which are concerted activities, which are retaliation, discharge, and discipline. Coercive statements, such as threats, promises of benefits, but not delivering them. Coercive actions, which are surveillance of the contractors, and then discharge, including layoffs or refusal to hire.
That's right. And then just to further clarify as well, I think that these allegations were made both against Nintendo, but also Aston Carter, which is a hiring firm that works with tons of different companies, but is the hiring firm for Nintendo of America. So a lot of these promises were made by this company, and I think the NLRB kind of like complaint is against both Nintendo and Aston Carter equally as well.
And the NLRB is the National Labor Review Board that
is
the legal body that oversees labor.
And they're part of the U.S. government.
And the U.S. government is part of the United States.
And the planet and the universe and God.
We're having fun, but this is a serious issue.
Yeah.
But we're going to make
there's a lot of acronyms you might hear. So
there's going to be a lot of Donkey Konga jokes throughout as well, I'm sure. But no, I think one of the things that kind of, it's not the same, right? But a lot of the issues that have come up around Ubisoft and Activision, and I think now you're hearing about this Nintendo stuff, a lot of this is what has sparked this movement towards unionization. And so I think it's kind of a complex discussion here. And I don't think any of us, I mean, Frank, I don't know what you would feel comfortable saying about your knowledge and expertise here, but none of us are experts, right? But Frank, we have you on because you might know you might know a little bit more about this than us.
Sure. So I've been part of CWA, which is the Communication Workers of America, which is a union, a big union here in Texas and the United States and the world, as we talked about earlier. But one of their arms is called CWA Code, which is their campaign to organize video games, specifically on tech workers, into unions. You could have seen, if you saw that picture of Chris Smalls, the guy who organized the Amazon labor union, when he went to the White House and was wearing that like Eat the Rich jacket, that was a CWA Code jacket. So this is kind of a hot topic in labor organizing right now. Because more and more of us are, we're working in tech jobs. I mean, I think we've all either known somebody or have been somebody who has had a contractor job at a giant tech company.
Yeah.
And have been sort of treated like second-class workers, like the complaint alleges. And so it's an important, and as tech companies take up more and more of the jobs, it's like an important and rich field for organizing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's an interesting, maybe a good place to start, right? A lot of what we've been hearing recently is about, and not only just these stories out of Nintendo, but, the Raven Software QA testers were all contract positions, right? A lot of the complaints we've been hearing out of Nintendo are, you got the red badges, which are the NOAers, as they call them, right, within the company, and then the blue badge people, which are the kind of forever contractors that kind of have the promise of being one day turned into full-time, but a lot of them have worked 4, 5, 6, even 10 years as contractors with never really moving up. So I think that a lot of within the games industry, a lot of the people that have been coming forward trying to organize right now have been contractors, right? And I wonder, I guess I have a question just kind of about that. I mean, is there any sort of distinction in the law about organizing if you're a contractor or a full-time employee? And is it that, do you think that it's that a lot of contractors are just trying to get to parity with a lot of full-time employees that are at these big tech companies? Or do you think that it's something that we might see going on with more full-time employees as well?
Yeah, that's actually kind of a pretty interesting question, because ideally, when you all vote to join the union, and then you enter into like a contract negotiation, and some states allow them and some states don't, depending on your job. And those are all laws that are subject to change and interpretation depending on what your judge is.
Sure.
So sometimes being a contract worker is helpful for you in that, like, you have a contract already. as opposed to like some full-time employees who are not allowed to, they have a hiring contract, but they're not allowed to collectively bargain it together, as opposed to like contract employees, which are just like, hey, you're hiring us through this contract that we all get. So you get to, that's kind of, it can go either way. But generally I would say that probably most contract employees are trying to get to the point where they get full-time things like benefits and better pay. And I know that like, there's even like weird little hidden benefits where like, I know, like, say at Facebook, at least when I would visit my friends there, contract employees couldn't eat at the cafeteria. They had to bring their own lunch. Yeah. So like,
which is ridiculous because I've eaten at the Facebook cafeteria and I've never fucking worked there. But the same thing is at Nintendo too. It was in that IGN article, is like the Cafe Mario or whatever, or going to Christmas parties, or using the kind of like, the physical facilities that they have on location. Like a lot of that was even withheld, right?
Yeah. And that's usually what they do. And even things like Uber and stuff are like essentially contract employees versus like that are like, every driver is a contract employee that is trying to get to the level of being treated as a full-time employee that would get like, say, retirement, stuff like that, healthcare.
Bringing it specifically back to video games, there's a couple of just interesting points that I wanted to mention, which is this just sort of showing the recent push and changes. There was an LA Times article earlier this year about video game unionization, and they mentioned that there's a group, the IGDA, which is the International Game Developers Association, which is a big game developer group, that they do a survey within the industry of people that work in it, and kind of the shift towards pro unionization that's happened. I think they said that like in the 2009, a third of game workers would support a union at their company, it said, and then in 2019 it was 47%, and then in 2021 it was 78% in favor of unions. And sort of similarly, there's been this organization that's kind of been created in the last several years called Game Workers Unite, that I think sort of started as a informal sort of Facebook group, but has risen to become a big entity that's pushing for unionization in video games. And Frank, you talked about the Communication Workers of America. I think one of the people that's involved in Game Workers Unite got hired by the Communication Workers of America to help organize workers in the video game industry in particular within the last couple of years. So it's just been a really big growing movement, right?
What do you think that is? Like, if you had to have, I mean, obviously I feel like in the past 2 years, we've seen a lot more organizing or interest in organizing, I think because of COVID-19, working from home. A lot of the kind of curtain was lifted on some of the ways that people have been taken advantage of by these big corporations. But, we're seeing a trend starting in 2009 up through 2019, which is well before that. What do you think is kind of the trend that is causing the interest in unionizing to go up so much?
Well, the one thing I wanted to really quickly throw in, and something I was trying to hint at the top, which is this sort of thing that dovetails with it, which is I think the news you hear about Activision Blizzard, sexual harassment issues, all sorts of complaints that are not just working. I mean, those are working condition complaints, but like not just like long hours complaints, but culture complaints that have grown in awareness maybe, and people started talking about them and that sort of thing. I don't know. There's probably other things. I think there's broader cultural issues going on, but the pandemic and sexual harassment issues seem to be two big ones, right? Yeah. Anything else anyone thinks?
I think a lot of it is, David, you mentioned COVID. I'm trying to remember what the article or an NPR article was that talked about the idea of mortality salience. The more that we think or we're aware of our own death or our own mortality. And COVID really reminded us, like, yeah, we're going to fucking die. Every single one of us are going to die someday. And that realization brings into question of, if I'm going to die, I want to be treated better, and I want better benefits. Like, I want more from life. I want better relationships. I want a better paying job. I want to be trusted at work. And the idea of death, that there's an end in sight, not to get too existential, really
too late, buddy.
Well, that's happening. Really drives some of the real big value motivations and the belief motivations towards unionization.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, it's like it's one of those things that we always kind of want to say, like, we want to survive, but not just to survive, but to thrive, like I'm tired of barely making ends meet. And I think everybody is,
Yeah.
Especially when you see people like Reggie, who have $1 million book deals and stuff, or, he's a millionaire. Meanwhile, he's telling you, like, hey, we got to get Mario Strikers out next week. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, crap. I don't know about y'all, but there's something I wanted to hit on, because you mentioned contract workers versus full-time workers before. Is since the beginning of video game industry, like, there's been issues with, like, say crunch, which like is like a pretty well documented issue, but also like, hey, if you're going to like work here, you need to accept a low pay because there's a lot of people who want your job.
Yeah. The whole dream job idea, right?
Exactly.
Like, you should just be happy to be here.
What a scam.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I don't know about y'all, but like, I remember reading in like Electronic Gaming Monthly, like, you think you want to be a playtester? Sounds like making money playing video games all day. Well, you're wrong, buddy. And that was like 1995,
Yeah.
Like, it was, and I've, I think
EGM's a woke rag.
Classic woke mob. You hear these stories about like all these software developers that need to like do cocaine to keep up with the demands, and like need to like just constantly fight and find an edge so that they don't get kicked out because some 16-year-old learned C++ and is willing to do the job for $10 less an hour or something like that.
Well, I think there's a lot of things, and I don't want to lose any of the threads, but that definitely reminds me of a few months ago. This is on the cultural consciousness, right? I was listening to NPR, and there was a talk about labor, unionization efforts in creative industries, not just video games, but I think it mentioned video games, but it's also about art galleries and all sorts of different. And I mean, creative fields are exactly what y'all are saying, right? Dream jobs, right? Like,
let's go into the animation industry right now.
Yeah, many people that want to do creative work, right? And there's it's appealing. There's for people like, I think I could probably say, like, all of us, we're all creative people. This is the kind of work you want to do, right? Where you get to make cool stuff and tell stories and that kind of work. And there's exactly as David said, and Frank, you said too, I think, there's always somebody else who wants this job, right? And so they use that as the threat, right? And that's why it's hard to create unions in creative fields, maybe harder than being like I have a friend in California who's an elevator repair person, and they have a union, and I don't, not that that's not a bad job, but I don't know that anybody, as a kid is like, I want to be an elevator repair person. There might be some people, but like often,
I know,
but there's a lot more people that want to be a rock star or want to be an artist or it's a lot harder to, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like you want to be an elevator repairman. There's like a path. And that kind of a thing, right? You learn the trade, they probably will hire you, but you want to be a video game artist. There's a lot of people who want to do that. I've rambled for a while.
No, I mean,
it's good.
And what you're talking about is like beyond that, like they will, as far as I know, my interpretation of even full-time employees get laid off once a big game gets released, as they will just chuck you to the curb because they don't need you anymore because they're not developing any property right then and they can't afford to do it. And now we've seen the fruits of our labor as Mario is like got his own theme park. You're like, what?
yeah, he's got his own Minions movie coming out. But yeah, I mean that too. It's also like there's the whole like we don't need you anymore because we've like just finished the project. But it's also like the bigger and bigger that the industry gets, the bigger and bigger budgets that these big AAA games have, the more and more astronomical their sales projections become. And if they don't meet these like completely unrealistic sales projections, then they are forced to lay off a bunch of people because they've budgeted way outside of their means. We actually saw that quite a bit with I don't know if it was Crystal Dynamics specifically, but one of the Square Enix companies that were just, a lot of people were just sold over to Embracer Group, is, Tomb Raider made it sold like 10 million units and it was still deemed a financial failure. You know what I mean? And so it's like, as the stuff gets more and more and more expensive and AAA production just gets higher and higher and they just keep throwing people at the problem, that's inevitably going to just lead to major issues. Right. And so I think a lot of times, things have to be better staffed, right? You have to like be smarter about how you staff people. You have to like treat them better. And Nintendo is a company that has a lot of like employee retention, but especially a lot of these reports were saying like these contractors are constantly in fear of losing their jobs, and they're in fear of walking away from their desk for 10 minutes or taking a shit like on the clock, right? Because it's like you're gonna get a question about it whenever you get back, and it's like they're kind of looking for any little thing, right? And so I think that's a major problem too. It's you got to like hire smarter, not just more, right? I think that's a major issue.
Yeah, for sure. And making sure that like tech is not video game development is not a skill that like you just learn it once and you're done. You gotta continue to grow. All creative, fields are like that, where you got to keep studying, keep learning, so that you can. Because the way we make video games even 5 years ago is completely different than the way we make them now.
I mean, this whole conversation reminds me of Jeremy Muller's book called The Tyranny of Metrics, which talks about just the American culture's obsession with accountability and metrics. Like, how can we measure everything? How can we make sure the contract employee is delivering on what we paid them to do? How can we, down to the minute, down to the second, squeeze every ounce of productivity from them? And that's counterintuitive, like what Brene Brown is doing on her end with like the dare to lead and like believing in people and building trust, and having trust form accountability, which delivers better productivity. Two different sides of the spectrum. But it is frustrating the more, and I love data. I love tracking things, the movies that I watch, the times that I spend with people. But it's also terrifying when that data is used against you as a worker who's just trying to make ends meet.
And I think something you just said too struck this for me about, and tying it back to that whole idea of the pandemic being a part of this. A lot of people, those of us who were fortunate enough to work from home, I think there was a lot of that sort of like, we can't monitor you. And I know that for me, like I found that when I was working during the pandemic, I was actually working. Whereas opposed to like when I was in the office, which I can now freely say because I no longer work there, but I would waste a lot of time at the office, right? Like I would get into the office and just do nothing for 30 minutes at least, you know what I mean, in the morning. And whereas when it was my time though, I would work during the time I sat down and I would get the same amount of work done. And I think I think that was another thing about the pandemic that has woken a lot of people up, right? Is like, if I'm going to work, I want to work when I'm working and not when I don't know how to explain it. Y'all are nodding. So I think
no, totally. And not to just kind of keep moving it into these different threads. I hope I'm not derailing us too much, but I think that that's a big reason why we're hearing a lot of complaints out of Nintendo right now. I mean, look at, Kit and Krista, who did the Nintendo Minute. That's what they're famous for. They left Nintendo because Nintendo decided to close their Redmond City office, right? Is that what it's called? Yeah, I think so. The California satellite office where they worked, and the Toronto office as well. They closed both of those, and they were basically like, hey, we know you guys have been working successfully from home for the past 2 years over this pandemic. We've decided we're reopening. We're closing these. So it's either move to Washington or leave the company, right? And that just puts people in a really shitty situation because it's like, they've been with the company for 15, 20 years, living happily. They live in California. All their friends and family are in California. Suddenly being like, hey, this thing that's been working completely fine, we're arbitrarily not going to let it be a thing anymore, is very frustrating for people. And I think it's especially contractors and stuff, right? And so that already are not getting benefits that they feel like they are owed, right? And so I think that that's a big reason why we've been seeing a lot of this stuff specifically out of Nintendo over really the past 6 months. A lot of that has been kind of snowballing since the closure of the Redmond City office.
One thing that makes me think of too, and I think, you think about Hollywood or something, a lot of that happens in LA, right? Mm-hmm. So if you live in LA, you can work on this production, then you can work on the next one. But if you work in video games and you get laid off, at least historically, this is changing, right? With more remote work being accepted, but you've got to move every few years. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing I think that, people that burns people out, and that's
totally,
yeah.
It's not ideal for a family.
Right.
Yeah.
Just anecdotally, if I could share a little bit about my own story. So I went to school for video game design, grew up in a small town, moved from my small town in Ohio to go to college to learn 3D modeling and graphic design, and then got into the QA industry. I was a contractor for THQ for about 12, 13 months. And the culture at the time was great. And I was very happy to be a part of some part of the video game industry. And the more I worked there, the better relationships that I built over time. But I was getting paid $9.25 an hour in a city. I was living in Phoenix at the time with whose housing prices were increasing, whose rents were slowly increasing, as is happening all over the country right now. And I couldn't sustain my life making $9.25 an hour in an industry that I wasn't sure that I could stay in. Mm-hmm. I'm from a small town, so I went to school and I had student loans, and $9.25 is not going to pay my bills and pay back my student loans. So I had to, at some point, make the sacrifice of I can't keep my promises of paying back my student loans and defaulting on my student loans and sustain my current lifestyle at the same time, because I wasn't sure if I didn't know as a contractor if my job was going to become full-time, if at all, at any time. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't sure if video game companies were going to open up in Phoenix, or where would I would have to move to a different state, city. I would have to rebuild my social life, make new relationships. But so there's real struggles there for me personally. On the other side of the good parts was working there was great. Everyone loved being there. The difference is we're in Austin right now, and people fucking love, I would say for the most part, love Austin, Texas. They like being here. In Ohio, people don't like being in Ohio.
I'm glad you finally said it, man.
Oh, yeah, no, I fucking love Ohio, but
we've been dancing around it for 3 years on this podcast now.
Yeah, but people were so they were getting paid $9.25, but people were so excited and so happy. They did some of their best work. I had some of the best parties, made some of the best friends. I would sleep under my desk. We would have Smash tournaments during lunch breaks. We played Mario Kart during lunch breaks. We played Wii Sports during lunch breaks. It was super fun, but that fun is unsustainable at what I was getting paid. And so it is a mixed memory of joy and frustration.
Mm-hmm. And it feels like that's exploiting young workers, right?
Yeah, totally.
That's what the story you're telling.
The naivete. Yeah. It's easy to take advantage of it.
And it potentially locks, it keeps the industry from getting too inclusive, right? If you say get pregnant, you cannot move to another city. You can't afford to take out loans. If you maybe are, maybe you are deeply entrenched in the culture of, Austin, Texas, or Phoenix, and you're going to move to Toronto where people don't talk like you, don't act like you, it's hard,
Mhm.
like if you have a couple generations going back, like why would you do that?
Or bringing it back to Nintendo, it's like, okay, hey, you still want to work here? Better move to Seattle, where the price of living is like way higher than it might be wherever you were living currently, right? It's just like, and it's like if you're making, you're like a lower end, you're working in a call center at Nintendo of America, you're not necessarily going to be making like enough to get a place like where you need to be able to commute, right? So there's a lot that goes into it that makes it very difficult.
And maybe you would move there as a contractor
Right.
in hopes that it would turn into something with no promise that it could
Right.
turn into anything.
Right.
Maybe that contract's only 12 months and then you have to move back to wherever you moved from.
Yeah.
I think I think there's something that you said, Matt, that I think is really good to bring up too. And it's that and that's something that I've, in all these articles that I've been reading specifically about Nintendo, is that like everybody liked their job and wanted to stay at their job. You know what I mean? It's not like everybody was like, man, they fucking, drove us into the ground and it was blah, 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 right? It's like, they like the people they work with. They like the work they were doing. They all were there because they were passionate about the product, right? Because they had been like fans forever, right? And that's why it's so disappointing that this can't be met. And I think it's that their needs as workers can't be met. And I think the main reason why it's really disappointing is because like Nintendo is having fucking banner year after banner year with the Switch, right? I don't want to excuse it, but it at least like makes a little bit of sense. Some of these practices happening around the kind of 1-2 punch that Nintendo got during the 3DS. 3DS eventually became successful, but at the launch of the 3DS, it was a nightmare. They had to slash prices. They had to give away games for free. It was a nightmare, especially in the US, right? Did great in Japan, but in the US, it was really, really hard for them. And then the Wii U was a failure across the board globally, right? So it like kind of makes sense that some of this would start happening during that. But for stuff not to get better since 2017, where it's just like Nintendo keeps flaunting. We talk about their fucking financial successes constantly on the show. We go over their financial reports. It's like for that not to be represented within the company is the resentment is clear, right? like you would be incredibly resentful of that, right? And I do think a lot of that too, like probably comes from NCL, right? And the kind of like Japanese like boss of Nintendo, right? The kind of like, we've talked a lot about how NCL and people that work at the EAD divisions of Nintendo, they don't know how to do work from home stuff. It took them forever to adapt, right? And so it's like, if they're deciding a lot of the rules on like when and where people are going to work, all of a sudden you've got a whole new element to it that's making it even more complicated, right? That's only going to keep growing resentment. And this is stuff we've seen throughout the decades, not only at Nintendo, but at Sega as well. There've been major issues between Sega of America and Sega of Japan. And so it just seems like very, very complicated. And I completely understand people's frustrations.
Yeah. And, we were talking about earlier in this episode, like, shareholders getting a say in how the game works, and like, famously, like fans will sometimes like get to rally and get a game remade or rewritten. In the case
Xenoblade Chronicles, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Project Rainfall, baby.
Yeah. Mass Effect, like it's all.
Yeah.
and Reggie, Doug, they all get a say. But nowhere in there is the workers saying like, hey, actually, I spend a lot of time with these properties and I kind of get how they work. It would be cool if I had like a say in what happens here.
Well, maybe we can use that as a bit of a jumping off point then. How would a worker who is having thoughts like this, how would they get their voices heard? What in a position, obviously we're not, I don't think that like Nintendo of America contractors are listening to us for advice right now, but just like me personally, it's like, how would you start organizing for something like this? How do you, because that's difficult, right? I mean, especially when you're worried about your job being on the line for something like this, like that one worker has alleged to the NLRB, like what are the best ways to unionize, to organize those around you to do something like this?
Yeah. So the first step is talk to your coworkers, and it's going to be every step of the way is talking to your coworkers and making sure that you guys are in solidarity with each other, to use the big scary S word, but like, you're always making sure that whatever you want, you're also talking with each other and coming up with a cohesive plan. Because, if you march into the president's office and say, I declare a union, you're fired, like that's, that's really how it goes. And then what you would do is you would seek out a organization that I like called EWOC, which is the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. It's kind of run by the United Electrical Workers. And what they do is they will connect you with organizers across any industry and any kind of spectrum, and help you run a union campaign, which would be involved. Basically, you tell the NLRB, hey, I want to form a union. They say, cool. Do you have enough people to ask for that? And they say, and you have to say, yeah, I've got X percentage. I forget what it is. And then you have an election. And if enough people vote in favor of it, that is now recognized as a business unit. The people that are now people that can represent you in a negotiation with the company for better benefits, better pay, better working conditions, whatever it is that you want. Maybe just say like, hey, Nintendo, we would like you to put guns in your games, and we're negotiating for that. Whatever.
No more paint in Splatoon, only bullets.
Yeah. I want that paint to be blood.
Common
Blood of my enemies and myself.
Or maybe it's something as silly as like, hey, the toilet paper sucks here. Like, I would like something better. It doesn't have to be necessarily money, because there's a lot of different little tactics that they'll use. Like you'll see this just happened in Starbucks, where if you are organizing for better pay, sometimes your bosses will say like, okay, we've raised the pay. And then all of a sudden your union campaign that was going to build you power within the company and get you a spot, to negotiate with your bosses. Now your argument's undercut because now you're being paid a little bit better. Or they'll do something like I think Blizzard just did, where they are offering better pay for everybody except for people that are trying to unionize. And that is truly shitty.
Yeah.
And I think will probably backfire on them, but is something that, why would I take a pay cut to join this union? So the basic process is, keep it on the down low, start talking with your coworkers, and find an organization like CWA or Game Workers United, or really any of these. There's a ton of tech worker organizations out there that are like really looking to organize gamers, and I know that I think like at E3 and stuff like that, they do pass out literature now.
Not this year. Maybe they'll have them at the IMAX.
Sure. Yeah.
They'll have them at the IMAX theaters. They're showing Summer Games Fest at.
And it's a long process. It's a slog, but it's one of those things where like it's what you got to do to make your life better. It's everything seems impossible until it's done. I don't think any of us thought we were going to live in this world in 2019. Or 2015.
Well, this is a big, broad-ranging topic we've talked for a while. Is there anything we want to make sure we hit before we kind of get away? One of the big ones for me that I wanted to make sure we hit is sort of like, if you're listening to this podcast, then most likely you're not working in the video game industry, you're just a fan. What can fans do to support this? I think one of the things I read in one of these is like, and I think you even hinted at this kind of, Frank, with like fans, or maybe it was David, with fans wanting certain things in games and not getting heard. I think fans don't want predatory microtransactions in games, and probably your average developer doesn't either. Right? Like I think there are issues that overlap And are there ways that consumers can support unionization efforts?
Oh yeah, for sure. You always want to say like vote with your dollar and stuff like that. And that's true. You definitely want to like look into the business practices of the people that are making the games that you like, and you want to buy them and support them. But that's not always feasible. And also sometimes, you know what? Some games that are made under terrible business practices are fun as fuck, and you want to play them. That's totally okay. Because you don't want to like just boycott a company and just hurt the workers necessarily. You want the workers to build power. So the fact of the matter is, like, get on your social media and follow your follow CWA, follow Game Workers United. Like, get on there and see what the workers are asking for. And if you happen to know somebody who is, maybe you yourself are not in the video game industry, but people who are in the gaming industry, talk to them about this kind of stuff. I mean, because we're all trained to not talk about these things. And, one of the things Brene Brown has done is sort of shown us like a little path of like how to talk to each other and how to get open about things that are like, maybe, when you say, how are you doing? You say fine, and that's the end of the conversation. That's not always how you want it to be,
That's a really good point. And I think you're so right on that, Frank, about and I think that to answer the question that I asked earlier on like why a lot of this stuff is trending towards, talk of unionization and workers' rights is like gone up exponentially over the past few decades is because of social media. It's because of the internet. It's because we're all talking to each other now. You know what I mean? Like before, I never knew what the fuck somebody who lived in Dover, Delaware thought about their job. But now I can see it on Twitter the moment they tweet it. You know what I mean? And it's like, and I'm especially within the animation industry, which is the industry that I work in right now, at the White House, next to the Amazon worker guy, were representatives from Titmouse. Which, and they've been really pushing for unionization within the animation industry. And it's only taking off because it's spreading like wildfire on social media. And while we as consumers or a consumer of animation content might not necessarily have any direct influence on like what happens within those companies, what they can do is spread the word so that people within those companies are made more aware of what's happening, right? Because a lot of these corporations and companies and people like they are not going to, it's not going to be in their best interest for unions to be around, right? They want to make as much profit as possible, and they're going to want to exploit their workers. Not all of them, and not every company is inherently evil, right? But it's like the more that it's systematic, right? And the more that employees are aware that this kind of stuff is happening, the more they can start talking to each other, the more they can start comparing wages, which is a very important thing to do at any job you're at. Always talk about how much you're being paid with your coworkers, right? And stuff like that. It's like super important to get that dialogue going. And I think that that's like, there's very good reasons to shit on social media. Social media is a major problem globally, and it's led to insane issues within our culture, right? But there's also like the benefits of improved communication amongst societies and workforces and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, I think you're totally right. I do think and I think that's only going to continue to trend upward. The more this conversation keeps happening, the bigger and bigger it's going to snowball, right?
Yeah, and if maybe you don't like social media, that's cool too. Have a grill, grill and get with your coworkers, because the fact is, as more of us unionize, the easier it becomes to unionize for other people. Yeah. And, there's plenty of other great organizations that you can join, like UOC, I was mentioning earlier. Workerorganizing.org is a great organization where you can just chat with somebody and say, they'll give you your phone number and you call them and you say like, hey man, so I heard you wanted to start a union. What's going on? Just tell me a little bit about it. You don't really need a whole lot of experience, because basically what you're doing is you're intaking people and passing them on to a more advanced organizer. Or you can join your local DSA, and hopefully, join. Like you said, everybody wants to be part of this growing labor movement, and I think it's important for all of us.
Well, I think we should wrap this up. Is there anything else anybody wants to make sure to get in our time, Matthew?
I was just thinking about, David, what you were saying, how social media is used to like talk to each other and to share stories about workplace situations. And the recent one that came to mind is this email, screenshot of an email that's going around from the CEO of Pluckers.
Yeah.
The CEO
I've not seen this.
Pluckers is a Texas-based chicken place where you get chicken wings. But essentially,
sports bar type of place.
Yeah, sports bar. Yeah. And he sent an email encouraging Pluckers employees to leave positive reviews on Glassdoor so they can hire more people. Really, to game the system.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's not sus.
Yeah, not sus at all. And so even
with like incentives or just asking them to, I guess.
I think he was just asking them to. I didn't think there was a bribe or anything.
Please. We'll give you one chicken an hour.
Yeah, we'll give you a 5 free wing card.
Like, yeah.
But you only get the 5 free wings if you buy 1 wing.
Or
medium drink. All it says is it won't take you but about 5 minutes to complete, and it would really mean a lot to us. You can actually leave more than 1 review if you wanted to use multiple email addresses.
Jesus Christ.
But the hilarious thing is like, yeah, this guy is like, he can get those reviews by making it a good place to work.
I know.
Also, why doesn't he just make like 45 email addresses?
Why?
Didn't he say he could just do that? Why are you making your employees do it? Do it yourself.
Yeah. That's fun. All right. Well, unless there's anything else, we obviously this is a big issue. We kind of, scratched the surface of it. So if you're out there listening and there's anything related to any of this that you want to share with us, we'd love to hear about it. And, I'm sure this isn't going anywhere. So we may have a related topic come up in the future as well.
Yeah, it's definitely an ongoing thing. Yep.
Yeah, and so I think that wraps it up for this main topic on unions and labor rights issues, and we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the games we've been playing recently. I've primarily been playing Smash and Switch Sports this week. I don't think I have anything else to talk about. I got to play some Switch Sports in person with you, David.
Yeah, that was fun. Very fun.
Where'd you guys play at? You guys play at
my house? Cool. No, we played over here.
Afterwards,
yeah. Pat, when we went to Games Y'all, Patrick came and like scooped me up because I was kind of on the way, and then afterwards, we just kind of chilled for a bit and played some Switch Sports at home. We had like a weed and coke bender and just went until about 4 a.m. Just played Switch Sports the entire time. That's not true.
But no, I played with some with you, and I played some with my family, and and I don't think I've played a ton of other games, so that's probably it for me. I mean, we've already talked in depth about Switch Sports. I don't have anything.
Is tennis still your favorite?
I don't know. I've been enjoying tennis and played some bowling today. I still like that. And then I think you convinced me on badminton. I didn't really know what I was doing on badminton, and then when you and I played, and I realized, as you pointed out to me, that it's more like you're actually swinging, like like it's Shambara, where
it's
you're
more
holding
one-to-one of the movements,
and you can move it around freely. Then I was like, oh, I see, and now I can more. So I'm more on board with badminton now.
Mm-hmm.
When I play badminton, I just keep my the badminton up.
Bam, bam,
just bam.
Down.
Yeah, just down every time.
Yeah,
it just makes. I think it's funny. The little knee has his arms up. He gets tired.
I like doing that in Chambara, where I just have my arm like all the way out, just like. Oh. I'll go next because I've also been playing a lot of Switch Sports. I've become very addicted to soccer in Switch Sports. It's very, very fun. When you win, you feel like you're on top of the world, and when you lose, you feel like you've let down the entire world. You know what I mean? It's like really, for some reason, just like really emotionally investing playing that. So I'm looking forward to playing a lot more of that going forward. And I'm like ranking up now. I think I'm like a D. I think I'm a level D right now on that, maybe D minus. and kind of trying to get up the ranks on that a little bit more, and just trying to play more like as a team player. You know what I mean? And not just everybody rushing for the ball. Like it feels good to be like, just hang back and then just like you're protecting the goal and you stop shit from happening. But then when the ball gets past you, you just want to die. So that's a whole thing. I'm really enjoying that. And volleyball as well. I think those are probably my two favorite sports on here. I did beat Metal Gear Solid 3 on stream after last episode. 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Can't believe I've never played any of these games before. I'm having an absolute blast.
How about that final boss? No pun intended.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great stuff. Yeah,
Kuwabara.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that and like the little like shootout you have with like Ocelot at the end. Sorry, spoilers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, where like you have to actually press the button and all this kind of shit. Like it's just an incredible game from start to finish. I'm loving these games so much. I'm taking a little break on stream right now for Metal Gear Solid, but I think I'm going to be playing them in release order. So I think the plan right now is basically I'll be playing 4 next, and then Peace Walker, and then 5 Ground Zeroes and Phantom Pain. So that's kind of, I think, the direction I'm going. Missing like Portable Ops and Acid and stuff like that, but I'll hit those at some point later, maybe.
Are you going to hit up the old 2D versions?
I kind of want to. I mean, they're here. They're in the HD collection. They're in the. They're on there. So I've heard 1 is kind of not aged very well, and you can pretty much skip. But 2 is still a really good game. So I'll check that out at some point.
Yeah.
I still also really want to play Chicken Run for the Dreamcast, which is basically Metal Gear Chicken. And so I'll be playing that at some point on stream as a bit. But also it's a very fun game. I played that when I was a kid, but I never played Metal Gear Solid. So I don't know where my priorities lie.
When are you going to stream the pachinko machines?
I'll have to. That'll be a just chatting stream where I bring my phone to.
Hey, it uses the Fox engine from Phantom Pain. So
yeah, they remade shot for shot all the Snake Eater cutscenes in better graphics. So it's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Waste of resources, if you ask me. Konami's gonna Konami, right? Thank you for letting me do Castlevania. Anyway, speaking of streams, I did play Words with Freds on stream. I am now the world record holder in the 50 streak percent on Words with Freds, which is a Wordle clone on the Switch. I beat 50 Wordles in about an hour, 17 minutes, which doesn't actually seem that fast. So I feel like if anybody else tried it, they'd probably beat me, but nobody really plays that game, and it's not a category on speedrun.com. So I'm going to call myself the world record holder in that right now. Feel free to beat me. I'd love to have a race, see if we can go back and forth on that.
It's a Wordle clone that they called Words with Friends.
Words with Freds.
Oh,
that's what it's called, because Friends has too many words, or too many letters for it to be fit. But anyway, it's really great. It's like, watch my stream. It's like a really, really robust. It's $1 unless you own a game called Love, and then it's free. I'm going to stop talking about Words of Freds on this podcast. It's not like that's the 4th week in a row. No, it's okay. It's just really, really good. It's like a better version of Wordle. I love it. And then real quick, the last couple things I've been playing is Grapple Dog. I brought that up before. I've been playing a lot more of that. Grapple Dog is a really amazing pixel art indie platformer. The more and more I play of that game, the more and more I like it. It's just kind of like one of those old school platformers that there's not much to it other than the fact that it's just a really good game. So there's not really much to say other than buy the game. It's fantastic, especially if you like 2D platformers. You would love this game. And then lastly, I've been playing Pocky and Rocky Reshrined. I've got the Japanese version on my Switch right now. It comes out in June, I think, in the States. The full English version, although the Japanese version has English in it. And that game is so fucking fun. Really difficult. It's like, it's hard, man. Like, I'm not great at it, but I'm having a really good time. It's got beautiful pixel art. The game runs like buttery smooth. It's just like a really, really good remake of those kind of Natsume Taito era kind of run and gun shooters. I think they also did a Wild Arms remaster a year or two ago on the Switch. So they've been kind of like redoing a lot of their old games. It kind of reminds me of the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, where it's not like a full remake with a whole new art style, but rather just like perfecting it's like how you remember it, but it never could have been like that on the Super Nintendo because of hardware limitations. You know what I mean? So it's a really great remake. I really recommend it when it comes out in June on the US eShop. Matt, what about you? What have you been playing this week?
Switch Sports. It's
Frank.
great. I'm Switch Sports, and then I'm continuing my journey on Chrono Trigger, which is my travel-only game, the game that I play specifically on airplanes. And that's been great. I just passed, I got to the Kingdom of Zeal. I don't know. I've played Chrono Trigger many, many times, probably 10 times. Never ceases to amaze me. It's such a good game.
What's your favorite sport in Switch Sports?
Soccer.
You're a soccer boy too?
Yeah, soccer boy all the way.
Let's get together and play some soccer, man.
Yeah, I like. I think you made the joke that it's Rocket League, but people.
Yeah. It's a lot of people have been saying that, but
it's great.
We should play one-on-one soccer sometime. I don't know if you've done that yet, but it's when you play online, you have the option to play with bots. Like if you're playing with two people, or you can just do one-on-one, and that's actually really fun. It's 2-minute rounds instead of 3, and the field is way smaller, and so it's a lot more immediate, and it just moves really, really fast, and it's actually a really fun mode.
If I lose, then that's my fault. But if on a team game, it could be someone else's fault. I like not having all the responsibility.
Okay, that's completely fair. I like the 4-on-4 too. We'll play however you want.
We can play whatever. I don't care. Let's do it.
All right.
Frank, what have you been playing?
I'm trying out this game called Stardew Valley.
Familiar.
Fun. I'm trying to 100% it. I'm at year 5. It's cool as hell. Everybody loves me. It's my dream scenario.
Agrarian leftist Frank Netscher.
It is so
actually
nice
he went for Jojo Mart and
it's just wish fulfillment,
Yeah.
But it is nice too. It does make me think about my work a lot, where I'm like, man, I wish like my work was like, oh cool, here I got some food that I grew myself and I'm seeing it benefit my community. What a nice thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great game if you haven't heard of it. And I just wrapped up Disco Elysium too, which is fun
shit.
as well.
What did you play Disco Elysium on? What platform?
Switch.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah,
very good.
And it occasionally had some slowdowns and stuff like that, but it still is beautiful. It's not a particularly demanding game.
And you enjoyed the story on that, because that's a very story focused game.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought the acting was great. I thought the story was great. It was cool as hell.
That's been on my list for so long. I'm just trying to find the right time to jump in.
Yeah, I hear you. It's text adventure, but for the modern day.
Love to see it. Great stuff.
Yeah.
All right, then. I guess that's it. Thank you so much, Frank, for coming on and talking to us about, everything, unions and the news, and appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to MilkyWay.co, who does our website. Thanks to Corduroy for doing our music. And if you're looking for me, Patrick, you can find me online most places as PDYX.
Hey, I'm Matthew on Twitter, MATHYOU.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Frank? Where can people find you online?
Oh boy, don't. I don't really get on social media, but except for on the gram, you can find my improv team, Fuck This Week, on Instagram and Facebook, and we do a show every Monday at Fallout Theater here in Austin.
There you go. Fellow comedian Frank Netscher. He's a farmer. He's the workers' right activist, and he's a funny man. That's what we like.
A lot of free time on my hands.
All right, folks. If you'd like to find our show on social media, please do find us. We are at Switch Headz on Twitter, at Super Switch Headz on Instagram and Facebook. We got a website, switchheadz.com. And of course, we got our Discord. and our Facebook group. The links of both of those will be in the description of the show, whether you're listening to it or watching it online. And as a reminder, if you do listen to our show, please pop over to our YouTube channel and give us a like and subscribe over there. It helps out a lot with the metrics. And leave a comment, too. Every time you leave a little comment, it gets more and more eyes on the show and grows us even a little bit more. Because, hey, everybody needs a little bit of growth in their life. We treat our employees really good because we make nothing. I don't know what that means. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this episode on the growing labor movement in the games industry. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Once again, Frank, that was a blast having you on. We're going to be back next week for an all-new episode of Super Switch Headz, so make sure you tune into that. We're going to be having some special episodes coming up kind of soon as well, a little bit later into the month and into next month, so be on the lookout for those. And folks, you know the drill. We love you guys. You guys be safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Share the podcast around with some friends that you love. And other than that, guys, we're gonna see you next week. We love you. Be safe out there. Bye-bye.